Daisy's excused because she's the one who's
Technically,
been a
this
couple of
could
times
be a
today.
hat. Like, this is a headpiece. So
That is a headpiece. Okay, it's the headpiece
it's a
special.
hair hat.
It's the
So
headpiece special.
there you go.
Done. Yeah. And Pascal's had a haircut, so he gets to show that off because he's got a nice lid now.
He's looking sharp, Pascal.
He is
Look,
looking
look.
sharp, isn't
It's
he?
very nice.
He's so
Appreciate it, guys.
DC. I love it.
Slick.
Okay. Startup support office hours. I think that's just become the name. I keep saying it's a working title. I've said it so many times now.
But Matt, it does what it says on the tin. I'm a big fan of Ron Seal type names.
Yeah, and it is, and when you abbreviate it, it's just called So Backed. So that's kind of fun. Okay, this is a bit of a tribal one because the founder, Joe Perkins, who we have in center screen, is a Trojan horse. In that he is also backed community. We've rigged the game, but we're allowed to because it's our show. And I also just want to say huge shout out to Julius for his headpiece, which is not only controversial, but
Where's the controversy? Like, what's the? He's just being safe, right? This could
If
get
you wanted
dangerous.
to, you could do a whole thesis about whether or not that counts as a headpiece.
yeah.
Headpieces are decorative. It's not decorative.
It's protecting him from the 5G, and that's important, right?
Yeah. And from the tough questions that hit us.
I'm excited for this one because I love
Amazing. So we get together here every 2 weeks, and we hang out with founders, and we problem solve, and we share our expertise as investors, domain experts, operators. I say we. I don't do any of that. I just chat shit in the beginning and then get out of the way. But what I'd love to do is get everyone to introduce themselves briefly, name, role, what you're up to these days, and then Joe's going to take us through a little bit about what landscape is. I'm sure the people here are very familiar with that, but some people watching may not be. So Joe's going to take us on a rundown of what landscape is about, and then he's got three, but we say we'll start with two and see what happens. He's got two pretty awesome questions, which he's going to take us through, and we're going to try and problem solve alongside him. So why don't we start with Pascal? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Pascal. I'm an investor at Backed. So here at Backed, we focus on backing seed stage companies across a range of different sectors. So yeah, that's my day job.
What's the night job?
That's for me to know, and hopefully for you not to find out.
Fighting crime.
Okay, Gurjinder says it's a bit crackly, so I'm going to turn my fan off just in case it's me, which is a massive sacrifice.
I like how you say just in case it's you. It's definitely you.
It could be a lot of things.
We're going to try. Let's start with that. It might not be you. You might be able to turn it back on.
Well, if it's still crackling, then I'm putting it back on. I'm turning it back.
Okay, why don't you introduce yourself, given that we're chatting anyway.
Okay, I'm Daisy. I'm very warm right now, but otherwise I run network at Backed, which is very fun, and I also do our D&I strategy. And I'm very excited to be helpful because Joe's great.
Done. Winning. Saka, over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Saka, and I fulfill 3 roles so far. The first is as a scout at Backed VC, which I'm very proud of. Number 2 is I'm also a product marketing leader at QuickBooks for fintech and ecosystems. And number 3, I also make music, so check out my stuff on Spotify.
It's really good.
Nice. What do we look for? How do we find your Spotify?
Well, it's pretty easy. Just type in Saka Nuru and you should find it.
Boom. I love it.
It's good. It's good vibes.
Christian, over to you.
Hi, I'm Christian, a new venture scout at Backed, which is exciting. And I guess I kind of wear 4 hats throughout the day. So day job, senior innovation strategy consultant, Capgemini Invent, global shaper at WEF. And what's been keeping me busy the last few months, startup advisor for multiple founders, and my multifaceted gay hats, which right now I'm using with queer founders, and very excited to be here.
Wait, you need to tell us a bit more about the last thing. What's going on?
What's going on? Well, so basically I'm looking to bring more intersectionality to the venture startup world. So I do one-on-one mentoring, coaching and advising for LGBTQ+ founders. And I'm also working with some investors to figure out if there's a way we can, add intersectionality as a stronger criteria when trying to make investments and basically even out the playing field.
Awesome. I would love you to extend the invite to Startup Support to everyone in your community. I know Joe's done the same for the landscape community, and we've also asked a couple of others, YSYS and Huckletree. I'm now put you on live on air with my requests. So send us your people. We are good people, giving good advice, sharing good vibes, no bullshit. So it's a good place to be. Last but not least, I left you last because you were late, Julius. That's why.
I am such a big fan of live shaming. I think we don't do it nearly enough as a society.
And this is also the second time that I'm late.
I know.
A good way to begin my introduction, right?
Daisy said you have big CEO energy.
It's true. You've no idea where you're supposed to be at any given time. Or what that is the hallmarks of a person with many assistants.
Thank you. So, and no technical chops, that is, because for the second time in a row, I didn't find the link to actually that, and I am so sorry. My name is Julius, by the way. I work as a executive coach to VC-backed founders based in Berlin. And I'm also part of the Backed Scout community, and I'm also a musician. And I'm a bit jealous of Pascal's haircut because I'm just for the last 4 minutes and it's just trying to fix my hair and the camera.
No, you never want to notice something. I made that mistake the last time I was on here and I realized that this is asymmetrical and I lost, I want to say 3 good hours of brain power thinking about it. So
anyway, it's an honor to be back on here. Thank you very much.
Next time we do this, we need to somehow integrate some kind of freestyle musical component to these sessions.
Very good.
I don't know when your next slot is, Julius, but we're gonna prepare for
bring
it.
one of your many guitars.
It's gonna be powerful. We're gonna try some rhymes,
Back to the home office.
poems, and it's gonna be a lot of fun or disaster, but it's up to us.
We'll find out.
All right, Joe, not last but not least, tell us who you are, and you can roll straight into what Landscape does and then into the challenges you want some plumbing on. Let's go.
Cool. So thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. My name is Joe Perkins and I'm the founder of Landscape. Started Landscape probably started around a year ago, but actually went full-time on it around 9 months ago. And the aim of Landscape is to raise transparency around the startup funding ecosystem. And I don't really have a super sexy tagline right now, but the one of the kind of bigger missions is how do we make fundraising better for everybody? So better for founders, but also better for investors. So kickstarted that mission. As I said, probably around May last year. I had this kind of, I guess, a bit of a rough experience fundraising for my previous startup. We pitched tons and tons of VCs. We had some good experiences, so some really good experiences, and then we had some bad experiences, some really bad experiences. And it was, I'm not going to lie, it was it was in a pub one Friday night after too many beers. I was like, I wish I could just warn future founders, stay away from this person because they might be a time waster, or just take a Zoom call with this person, or whatever it might be. And that was when the idea of kind of Landscape as the glass door for VC was kind of started. And I kind of looked at it and I thought, there's not really anything crazy technical in here. A lot of this revolves around kind of the go-to-market, really, more than anything. How do we get VCs on side? How do we get founders to actually submit reviews? And so we just basically, I say we as in the royal we. I started with my MVP, which was literally a Typeform link, and I would just send the Typeform link to founders and be like, "Hey, do you want to anonymously review your investors?" And shock horror, they were all like, "Oh hell yeah, I want to anonymously review my investors," both investors that they took money from and investors that they didn't take money from. So quite quickly, I kind of thought there was something there. I had no money to spend on kind of testing this or anything, so my go-to-market was very much get 50 reviews, post them as far and wide publicly as possible, tag the VCs, tag the investors, and just kind of see where it goes. and it just kind of spiraled from there. So we quickly got to kind of 500 reviews totally organically, and it's just kind of grown since then. So then ended up raising some money in December, and now just basically building out a team around it. So I think it's fair to say like the review platform is kind of like our first product, but the aim is basically to build like a whole suite of products, tools, educational content, and a whole bunch of stuff around that basically helps founders through the fundraising process. So as I said, we started with the review platform. It's going pretty well, I think, and we have lots of good feedback from founders that it's been really useful, and actually in some cases just incredibly cathartic submitting a review. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are now. There's a team of, I think there's 5 of us now, some doing 1 day a week, some doing 4 day a week, myself and a couple of others full time. But yeah, that's kind of where we are now. We're just about to launch Landscape version 2, which is kind of basically a bit of a rebrand, like the tiniest rebrand you've ever seen. We've added like a splash of color in a couple of places. And yeah, that's kind of where we are now. So I guess rolling on from that, one of the challenges, and I think this is probably like will always be a challenge, and I think we're doing well in some areas but not well in other areas. But one of the things I'd like to put to you guys and kind of see if you've got any thoughts on is essentially when a founder submits a review, like there's a whole bunch of reasons why a founder might submit a review. And I think at the moment, a lot of the founders that are leaving reviews for investors are doing it as almost a bit of a pay it forward to the ecosystem. Like, hey, like I've had this good experience or this bad experience, and I want to share it for the benefit of the rest of the ecosystem. And I think those people are probably like typical early adopters. So they use the like super shitty type form that we had that took like 5 minutes to leave a review, and then they had to refresh it and then leave another review and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. And one of the challenges now is basically how to scale those reviews. So what incentives we need to kind of put in place to get founders to submit reviews. So that's one of the things I'd like to discuss. And then the second, which we'll move on to afterwards, I guess, is when I started Landscape, I was working on the assumption that if we managed to collect loads of reviews, loads of insights, then VCs would take an interest in getting kind of totally anonymized insights into how they're actually performing, so founder feedback that they receive. And one of the things I'm kind of realizing at the moment is that actually, and this makes me a little sad, but maybe actually most VCs don't actually care how they are perceived by founders. And so the second problem, and this is an interesting one because I mean, like, you guys are literally my market, so this is going to be super interesting. But one of the second point is just around what can we do? Like, how can we make VCs care about like getting feedback and improving, basically? So yeah, a bit of a spiel there. Sorry from me, but hopefully that kind of covers it off.
Cool. Okay, I think that was very clear. Tough, clear but tough.
Tough, yeah.
At the moment, how are founders incentivized to leave reviews, or like what are the triggers that lead founders to leave reviews?
So I think at the moment there's a couple of triggers. The first is that all of our traffic is totally organic. Really, like we do a tiny bit of outbound, but we found that outbound doesn't really necessarily work that well because founders like just don't want to be hassled, right? But at the minute, one of the good triggers is we say we've built into the platform, submit a review and you'll be able to see all reviews. So basically, we've like limited on the platform, and this is what we're launching in V2, until a founder submits a review. They'll only be able to see like 3 reviews per VC, and when they actually contribute to the platform and when they contribute to kind of the Landscape ecosystem, then it kind of unlocks more of the platform. So we're trying to gamify that a little bit, and then we've done things like branded swag. So like we've got like Landscape branded t-shirts, we're getting some branded hats, stickers, all that sort of stuff, which I thought, honestly, like given how much founders love branded swag, I thought was going to absolutely pop off. But to be honest, like hasn't really like worked as well as it could have done. So those are probably the 2 triggers at the moment. The third worth mentioning is that we do kind of partner with VCs, and then VCs get their own review link to send out to their portfolio. So I guess the third trigger is like, my investor has asked me to review them, which I think is probably a bit of a positive and a negative. But yeah, those are probably the main triggers that we have at the moment.
If you look at the funding process, I mean, if I was fundraising for a company right now, I would look at it like a sales process. So I have a pipeline of investors, and then I make a bunch of meetings, and they move down the pipeline. So, and I know there are a bunch of tools that help founders do that. You can use any sort of CRM, but there's also a couple of like specific tools for that. To what degree could you build either build a super simple pipeline functionality in Landscape so that you actually know that Julius, the entrepreneur, is now talking to Backed VC, and so then 3 days after the talk with Backed VC, you can ping me and say, so how was that call with Daisy really? And we're being off the records here, so you can really talk, right? And so then it's not incentive; it's more of a retention measure. It's like following up with them, but maybe you can use that.
Yeah, I really agree. I think something in the build, make the tool itself so functional that it makes sense to like do an awful lot on the platform, which then incentivizes more feedback. So if, for instance, it's already a fund discovery tool, which is still really powerful. Like at the early stages, there's still really difficult to get together a list of like which should you, especially to like get a tiered list of who should you be really excited to chase after, what's middle, what's whatever. So if that's already happening, then for it to go next step and be like, okay, cool, build your list. So if you've now left a review to then get access to the full thing, there's some really slick, frictionless way from there, build a list, and then sending nudges off the back of that then I think makes an awful lot of sense. The other thing I would say as well is in terms of the founders don't want to be hassle thing. And again, this is in a world where you are adding value in this way, not when you're not. But if you are, then I think setting just the repeated automated, because it's one of those where like it's never going to be annoying. Like it's like either I'll skip them most of the time, but every once in a while it'll trigger, okay, I should go do that thing. So I would definitely optimize for like more nudges rather than fewer for something like this, because it still has, relatively speaking, I would say like a halo of like, this is a good thing to do. So being hassled about it per se, I don't think doesn't generate the same kind of frustration as like buy my product or whatever. It's rather like do this thing, it's good to do anyway.
What about getting founders to pitch from within Landscape? Like you get a list, like Daisy said, now you get a short list of the right VCs. You can fill in a form within Landscape to make sure you're hitting all the right notes, like a VC's cold inbound form, like the one Backed or CCAMP have. And you can send it directly through Landscape to that VC. And that way you're already the gateway into their relationship with the VC. And then you can automate, then it's like you're, like Julius and David have been saying, you're part of this pipeline, but it's all happening through Landscape.
Yeah, that is like functionality that we 100% want to add. Like the reason that I've been holding off a little bit on this, and actually I'd be really interesting to hear your guys' points on this. I know it's a slight tangent, sorry, but the reason I've been holding off is because, realistically, this deal flow market, like I'm not an expert in or anything, still trying to learn the dynamics of it. The reason I kind of held off is I think it's quite easy to become a source of spam, whereby people are just sending you, if it was publicly available to pitch Backed, for example, and they made it onto a top 20 seed investors list or whatever it might be. Do you have any thoughts on like how that would be useful for Backed and non-invasive, like non-spammy? Because I'm assuming that I'm just not going to send absolutely everything to Pascal's email address, right?
Yeah, I think
which I do.
which Julius does every day. It's never Backed or deal related. It's just personal chat.
Julius's thoughts of the day.
But I think there are, I think top of mind, there are two versions of this, right? It's one, referring people in the right direction. So referring them to, kind of the cold inbound email address. And I think that is a slightly different proposition, and it's probably easier to implement. And I think I really agree with Daisy's and Vinay's points. It's like, how can you make Landscape not actually the point where like, this is where you go for like VC reviews, but it's like, this is actually where you go to like access the world of venture. And then you really kind of start to productize each and every element of that. And I think you can like go really far when it comes to discovery. I think there are like, some great lists. I think there's an angel called Jens Lipinski who, created this list. And I think it was like a big part of his brand back in the day, but he hasn't updated it, I think, for a while, and there's not much granularity. So like, can you be best in class for that? Because I do think those lists attract a lot of traffic, and then it's just like conversion through stages. And then I guess back to your specific question, one way of doing that is like, here's like the info at backed email, here's the same for front, and here's the same for another fund. Reach out that way. And I think generally the response from funds should be, we appreciate as much cold inbound as kind of possible. We want to build a big brand. I think the onus is then on funds to filter through that. And I think, put our hand up that, we have to do a better job of that, but we're trying to put the infrastructure in place to do so. It's always like what do you prioritize with limited resource question. But then the second point being, I think the marketplace is a deeper conversation, and happy to get into that now or later. How do you set up a marketplace where you can scalably filter, right? And I think scalably filtering is, to me, the biggest problem in that equation. I think it requires a lot of conversation. I think it is solvable. You might have to rely on angels, community at large, etc. But I do think it could be interesting, and I think you're more likely to iterate your way to something, like with anything. Because I think it's like, theoretically it's an impossible problem to solve, but you will come up with like a 90% solve by iterating your way towards something.
I think that's a really good point. I actually like both of those points there with regards to the CRM, Julius, that you touched on. I think essentially, if we can start helping founders to actually run their pitching process, whether it's like for a CRM or whether it's the ability to pitch funds cold, then as you say, we then get quite a lot of visibility on who's talking to who or who's pitched to, and then can automate those review requests off the bat, and they'll just be so much more relevant than us just cold inbound people over LinkedIn or whatever it might be. So two strong suggestions.
The other thing that I would add as well is, sorry, I'm talking a lot. Who was about to talk? Somebody was going to say something. I had a preliminary hum. Okay. The other thing that I was going to say is in terms of, again, making it a more attractive tool from the perspective of founders, because again, if it is, then they will come, and while they're there, they might as well contribute to it, sort of network effect type. The other thing that I think would be really powerful, because something that is still really, really hard to do as a founder, is understand, genuinely speaking, what funds actually look like, what they're most excited about, what they often say no to, like on that sort of granular level. And I think that's something that you actually are in a rare position to crowdsource. Like if one of the things that's being pulled from people at the point when they review is also like, like level of excitement about X, or even just like what was the main reason they gave you for no. And then if I can get this sort of information from that, like this fund might take their pre-seed, but something like, 75% of their rejections have been no traction, whatever. Or I can know sort of this was the partner that was spoken to and they really like this, so it's not pet subject. So I think there's also probably still some more to do, like how can you, without making them off-putting to put a review, pull that kind of information out of people that makes it all the more exciting to like jump into the platform and then while I'm there, I might as well contribute to fleshing this a little bit further.
If you take that idea further, you could run something like a campaign to say, talk to us about fintech investors and what they, as in like you pick some statements of some investors, and then you go out and say, dear founders, let's pick some fintech fund, right? Dear fintech founders, here are the funds that claim they invest in fintech or this subsection of fintech. We're interested in your actual opinion or in your actual experience. So get back to us and leave an anonymous comment, and then we can run it a bit more like a campaign because you have a different topic each time.
Yeah, I guess I think actually the idea of crowdsourcing it from the founder side is probably quite a lot smarter than the VC side, because one of the things I was always thinking is like, my assumption is you go to any VC and say, hey, like, what do you invest in? And they kind of keep it as broad as possible, right? Because like you want to see everything and look at everything. So even though a fund may never invest in edtech, they might not want to say, well, we don't not invest in edtech. So perhaps crowdsourcing it from the founder side is actually probably requires a little bit more productizing in terms of like this kind of like CRM/pitching functionality that we're talking about, but it's probably actually going to be far more powerful in terms of like collecting the data set there, because again, I think it would be amazing for us to tell founders, like, okay, if you're building like a seed stage fintech company with early revenues and you want to pitch back, for example, actually Pascal is the best guy to go to, not Andre or whatever it might be, and actually be able to help founders differentiate between like different partners in the fund or members of the investment teams.
That bit would be hugely powerful. Like that's something that I've even tried to bake into our tool, and it's just not available anywhere. Like even on people's LinkedIn, will they specify what they actually get excited about? The other thing as well is like, who is, and this could be you, this could be someone else on the team, but who is the like guerrilla marketing genius on the team? Because you just need that for something like this will live and die based on just like really cool stunts and really compelling things you do that pull in like both sides of the equation, both on the facing side and on the founder side. And a lot of that is hard to sort of say in a vacuum like this one, though. I think there's some good ideas we can, but it's like, if you haven't invested in that element of the team, then I would like hugely recommend it, because there's just some people who are just really good at this. And the more of those you do, the more it's almost inescapable. And I think this is a sort of small and densely interconnected enough industry that something can become standard very quickly. And it's like, well, where else are you going to go to for this information? It's an institution. It doesn't really take a long time for that to happen, as long as it's consistently just showing up everywhere. So I think that's something I also mentioned.
Potentially stupid question. What would the job title for that person be? Like if I went out hunting for that person, like I think hiring is probably one of like points fairly introspective. And what would it, is that a growth marketer? Is it what would you say?
Most likely a growth marketer, actually. If you look at the job description for that, it aligns more closely than any other job description I've seen.
Yeah. Difficulty though isn't like growth marketing feels like these days like so much of it is
growth hacker.
Yeah, like scraping and like hacker and like rather than activations.
You need someone who like you should maybe look at how this describes.
Like that's who I'm actually thinking. Maybe so Johnny, I think like as a separate aside, this is not like general advice for anybody watching, but for you specifically, you have access to Johnny, and he has worked with this and an awful lot of their weird shit, like tricking a bunch of food critics into eating their food and thinking that it was like fake or whatever else. So they've done a lot of things like that just work. It gets to the heart of things. It's funny, it's compelling. Also, everybody likes to talk about it. So I think that would be a big one in terms of fire. And then the other one is partnerships, because the more it's interwoven across, I think like media partnerships might be something worth looking at. If this is the data layer for a lot of discourse that happens in the industry, then everybody has to contribute to making this work. Then it's kind of starting to happen. Like Sifted did the list of who's top in landscape. So more and more of those. If maybe there's even something like any discussion or mention of a fund also has this as a throw-in. If you have thoughts in this fund, good or bad or ugly, we'd all love to know. Like here's the link to their landscape page. Like if it's more that's really powerful.
That actually leads me to like how about building integrations with Crunchbase or media pages to say mentioned, like say BackVC is mentioned. Do you have any experience with BackVC? Submit your rating here, or integration. If we come back on this funnel thing in Gmail, or you're mailing at back.vc. Would you like to leave a review? Right, to say to analyze the interaction that founders have with investors. If it's just by reading articles about them, or reading profiles about them, or actually emailing them, and going to exactly those interaction points, and briefly remind them if they want to do the review.
That's cool, actually. And I was thinking about that in the context of trying to gather reviews. One of the things you mentioned, or the key source of what you were talking about, Joe, was how do you source reviews? You mentioned about incentives, for the organic reach, but there's also another way to gather reviews, much like what Julius was saying. And so brands typically face this problem where they'll have reviews on their native website, they'll have some on Amazon, they'll have some that they gather on Google, whatever it is. And you want to leverage the reviews that you have in all these disparate places by collating them and then showing them on your website. So there are companies that offer things like this, like Reviews Bazaar and things of that nature. But I'd highly recommend you start to think about where are the places people are most likely to leave a review, and then how can I leverage or gather that information and collate it into one centralized place, so that I have the highest number of reviews or the best quality or whatever it is. If not, I think you'll struggle to get them organically by directing traffic to your website alone. It's a harder thing to do.
Or the reverse of that, right? Because VC is one of those weird things where who leaves reviews anywhere, right? Like you just gossip about it on WhatsApp or like swallow it deep in your gut forever to rage. So actually, if you are a fund that wants there to be some reflection of things that are said about you, you don't have that anywhere. And so maybe there's something to be said for the reverse, where there's an easy API or there's whatever that in the same way as I can have my tweets loading on my website, I can have my landscape reviews loading on my website. That becomes yet more incentive for me to drive people and for like my founders or anybody that I engage with to go there, because good, bad, or like it's going to show up there. So I think that's also potentially something really interesting. And then one controversial idea that just popped into my head is like, what about, because I don't know, is it currently possible for people to like discuss reviews, like comment on them, etc.? Like it's potentially a massive Pandora's box, but it's also just the best way to make something like, you know, center of gravity, everybody gets pulled into it, is that, ooh, I saw this review, I want to go respond that I agree or I disagree. Like pylons are effective. So possibly one to think about.
Christian,
so on the
hang on, let's get this man. Let's get his opinion.
So Joe, you mentioned at the beginning you've explored some early gamification, and I've seen I don't know if you've heard of Lunch Club, but they've done something that's worked quite well, which is like gaining a points-based system. So depending on how many reviews you get, you can collect X number of points and then exchange them for different services on the platform. So that could be, if you have partnerships on both sides, it could be, oh, you unlock a partner introduction here, or maybe we'll introduce you and you'll have some mentoring with XYZ VC, or, and this would depend on what stage the startups who leave review are at, if it's pre-seed, C, Series A, but you could also say you can exchange X number of points for maybe discounts and promotions of products and services that our existing founders who have left reviews are working on. So then that kind of turns into like a mutually beneficial cycle. So they leave a review and potentially someone else who leaves enough could be introduced to their startup. So you're kind of giving benefits in two ways there.
Yeah, I like the idea of going back to the founders. When I first started Landscape, I was actually looking at whether I could like set it up as like a cooperative or something, whereby when founders submitting reviews, they got like, you know, small kind of equity stakes or whatever it might be. But it sounds, Christian, like you're advocating for me starting a utility token Landscape, whereby founders get some tokens for submitting a review or contributing or whatever that can then be redeemed for X, Y, and Z, which I actually quite like, to be fair.
Or you could have, you could basically mint tokens for VCs, and then founders can buy tokens in VCs that they back, right? So there's monetary reward for backing the right VC.
That would be such chaos, and I would pay to see it.
Yeah, but they're like social tokens for VCs, right? So if you had a good experience with a VC and you expect them to give others a good experience as well, you know, you can benefit from buying it, and you can short a token if you expect others to have a bad experience as well.
This is a Pandora's box. This is definitely a Pandora's box.
This is way worse than mine.
No, I really like the idea of like a points-based system, though, Christian, away from kind of blockchain/tokenization. We are going to kind of look at that, but then it's throwing out like, the only thing I want to be careful of is like, okay, so if a founder submits like 10 reviews, they can redeem, I don't know, let's just say for argument's sake, half an hour of Pascal's time or whatever it might be. I'm just offering that up, Pascal, for you, by the way. The only thing I would want to be slightly wary of is that, you know, a lot of the founders that we want to help will be first-time founders, and so potentially might not have had a large number of investor reviews or a large number of investor interactions. But yeah, no, I really like the idea of kind of gamifying even further and having this kind of point system.
And quick question.
No, go on.
So sorry, I was just going to say, the number of reviews you have on there, to what extent, like, I don't know if you've done any fancy data algorithm, to what extent is it super positive or super negative? Because personally for me, if I go to a restaurant and I love it, I'll leave a review. If I hate it, I'll leave a review. If it's in between, I'm kind of like, nah, like it doesn't matter. So like, what is the mix of that, and yeah, how can you balance that better? I don't know if that's a problem yet, or I've just
yes, it's actually not too much of a problem. Like, I think even when I started, I was working on the assumption that like we'd either get like 0 out of 5 reviews or 5 out of 5 reviews, and that would be absolutely it. But I think part of the nature of like the actual review that somebody leaves has kind of combated that, whereby founders are rating these VCs on up to 12 different score factors, and we're quite often seeing that a founder will have, you know, what might be perceived as a relatively bad experience, and you know the VC ghosted them or whatever, but actually they still rate the VC 5 for approachability and 5 for diversity or whatever else it might be. And so we are seeing that actually we don't get many of the reviews where it's just like founders just, you know, ranting or like ad hominem attacks at all, really. That being said, there is obviously some sort of pool whereby you know, people who have had negative experiences really want to talk about it, but also people that have had really positive experiences. So I don't think it's a problem per se at the moment. And I think that the individual score factors within a review hopefully will kind of mitigate against that kind of moving forward.
Joe, there's something that just occurred to me. Another like art, because I know you're looking at angels anyway from the perspective of them being there to be reviewed. But I actually think angels can be a really, really powerful source of reviews themselves. Like they are interacting with the same VC set that's super relevant to the founders that you want to help the most, arguably have not sort of more time, but there's more willingness to engage in sort of what I might call ecosystem discourse anyway with that kind of archetype. They're the ones on Twitter the most. So the idea of opening it up to them to do reviews, I think also could be really, really interesting. And just pull one, more insight, but also just more traffic in general. Right?
Yeah. No, I actually really like that idea. I mean, we were thinking about allowing founders to submit reviews for angels, but angels reviewing VCs would be pretty cool as well. And it's actually funny because I think it's maybe a reflection of how opaque this ecosystem is, that like you would not believe how many VCs are like, oh, can I review other VCs? Like we've co-invested with some like,
which actually think also not a bad idea. Like
exactly.
Some interesting insights. There are some things that only we might know about certain co-investors because we've engaged with them and sat on boards with them that a lot of people wouldn't know. So I'm very pro like a Gossip Girl universe where in which everybody can disclose information about everybody, but I don't know how much of that you want to open up. But I think for sure, at the very least, angels, but you know, maybe everybody.
Sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
What kind of marketing partnerships have you done already? Because I feel like your brand ethos, which is about a more transparent venture ecosystem, shares a lot with some other brands. And then I can imagine it, for example, someone like Sifted or other players who are trying to aim for a similar thing, being potential partners for your service. And they've got this Startup Life newsletter they've just launched. And I wonder if there was a way for you to code into the bottom of their newsletter, like leave reviews, like make VC a fairer marketplace, leave reviews for funds, and do that in many other places. That's the first one. So newsletters, I think, because you can code that into the newsletter really simply and have it as a feature. Second one is getting in with founders much earlier on, like before they do demo days at accelerators or other universities, doing like some inbound marketing, like a primer for this is how you should. These things will increase your chance of success. This is what a realistic timeline looks like. By the way, when you do it, make sure you leave reviews on Landscape because we're trying to make a fairer marketplace. But getting them right at the beginning so they're more likely to be advocates as they go through their journey.
No, I like both of those. I think we organically probably already get quite a lot of super early stage founders, like people who are very, very early in their journey. So I think we could definitely do more on that angle. But on the newsletter side, embedding a Landscape kind of like logo or a call to action or something on the bottom of newsletters would probably be massive for distribution. We do. I kind of semi-regularly catch up with Amy at Sifted, and I think we've got a little bit of a sneak preview in September. Maybe before, we're going to be launching Landscape league tables. So basically, we're going to have it will be like the first data-driven lists powered 100% by founder feedback. So it'll be things like, top 20 funds as rated by female founders, or top 15 funds that invest pre-revenue, or whatever it might be. And so now just kind of figuring out what some description of like press partnership / relationship would look like there.
Yeah.
If you would build on that.
Sorry. I'll be very quick. Try and integrate into Playfair's female founder office hours as well. I don't know how they're currently doing quality control on those, but there's a lot of VCs that turn up, around 300 female founders, I think. So that will just
so we do their feedback for them.
You do it already?
We run the feedback for office hours, and it's always absolutely brilliant. To be fair, the feedback there.
Great. Yeah, that was it. Julius, go on, man.
If you move that move it one notch up to go to limited partners who routinely invest in VC funds, then at some point that can also become a measure to say, we want to invest maybe in diverse fund management teams, or we say we want to invest in diverse fund management teams, but we really just want to stick to what we've been doing. But maybe that feedback is something that they can hold against what funds are pitching, and in order to access that kind of crowd, there are a couple of industry events like Super Return in Europe.
Super Return was that? Sorry.
Super Return, yeah.
Okay.
That you can approach maybe as a partnership. I don't know, in some form. I think it happens in September every year.
Yep.
To put the pressure on VC funds, because you're skipping them and you're going to their bosses, to their investors.
Yeah, so we do actually, interestingly, this is something that we probably just started exploring, honestly, this week and last week, really. My LP network is kind of like zero, basically. But we have had, over the past 6 months or so, we've had probably 3 or 4 different LPs from well-known kind of institutional LPs inbound us and just ask, hey, would you make this data available to LPs? Obviously, always totally anonymized, but we would love to use this in our due diligence process. And so that's one of the things that we're exploring at the moment with various LPs. But again, the network there is a little slim. And I guess, as you said, Julius, the beauty of that is that, my assumption is that if we can get some LPs to come out and say, hey guys, we're using landscape data to aid our decision making in terms of throughout the due diligence process, I think VCs would have to take it seriously, because realistically, you don't want to turn up to a meeting with your limited partner where they've got more information than you on how founders are actually perceiving how you're performing.
But this is where the partnership with BD or somebody on that front becomes really powerful. As soon as you get 4 people that you've done this, that's enough for an article, and all the article needs to be how LPs are using better data in their due diligence, and you get mentioned. It's there, and it doesn't matter whether it's 4 or 50. The impression is out there, and that will do it. So it's I don't know if it's a bandwidth question and expertise, but so much of this is just if it's someone's job for sure, and that's what they're doing day in, day out, you're going to nail all of these. The ideas are there, and the execution is not very difficult. It's just a matter of doing it and pushing it through. But otherwise, it won't. Yeah, it'll take, I think, someone to do these, because it's all going to be relationships based at the beginning. It'll be outbound, engaging, and then agreeing, sort of idiosyncratic partnerships until you have something more standard.
Yeah. And I think it would be great to own, like a bigger LP, like the EIF, who's, anchoring every other fund in continental Europe. I think the British Business Bank is doing similar things in the UK. But if you manage, especially if you're focusing on relationships first, and you manage to just find a more junior employee in an asset manager who invests in venture, that already gives you the signaling that you need for something like what Daisy just mentioned. The press piece that says, oh, okay, this is a thing now. We need to be reviewed so that we can actually still go to our LPs.
Yeah.
Then that flywheel starts to set off.
Yeah, because it's a no lose to get access to more data for decision making, like data of this nature, especially when there's not really a lot of it. It's not like you're competing with a deluge like in a lot of other sort of asset classes. So the extent that it's there and it's accessible, probably even for some sort of like fee, I don't think there's a really good reason to not use it. But you just have to
I
start.
think the other side of that, the absolute beauty of like an LP relationship there is also that, you know, we get a lot of founders who have had like negative experiences who, you know, anecdotally are saying like, you know, what's the point in leaving a review? Like, is it going to make any difference? If we're then able to turn around to those founders and say, actually, the people that fund VCs are using this anonymized data set to decide, you know, where to allocate their capital, then it kind of gives the power back to the founders, which is where it should be anyway, really.
Yeah,
So
it's what Glassdoor did. Like once it became a thing that people would actually turn you down or not work for you, especially senior, potentially senior staff, because of that changes everything. Or Trustpilot, when it makes a difference to the people that matter, it changes the perception. And you're so close to it because it's such a small industry. Sometimes it's actually funny.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It reminds me of Ireland as a country. Like everybody knows everybody, so rumors take nothing to spread. And so I see one article and something's like, oh my god, it's a thing. Well, the LP's looking at it. Oh fuck. And it was
that's really true. Hey Joe, I wanted to make sure I communicated this to you in terms of the LOFAs. A LOFA is pretty much a leap of faith assumption. I think it'd be good to take a step back and analyze what are your leap of faith assumptions you're making about A, why people want to leave a review, or B, that you need as a business to get to where you're trying to get to. So to make it more concrete, here's an example. If we think of Glassdoor, is Glassdoor the number one player in that space because they had the most or the highest number of reviews? Probably not. Craigslist and a few other platforms had more reviews. So when I come back to your initial question that you wanted to source more reviews or get, you know, hundreds or whatever it is onto your platform, or that was the problem you're trying to solve, is that actually going to help you get to where you're trying to get to? Because ultimately, I don't think Glassdoor had the most number of reviews. What really got them over the line and, you know, becoming that number one player was the fact that they had established some credibility whereby the businesses on their platform, in this case, VCs, started bragging about, oh, look at how highly rated we are on Glassdoor as a recruitment tool, or, you know, we were rated top 10 or whatever it is. So the moral I'm trying to, you know, communicate across to you is what I think you should understand. What are your leap of faith assumptions? What are the assumptions you made about your business, and how do those ladder up to what success actually looks like? Because there are multiple things you can be doing, one of which is gaining more reviews, but the other thing is how you go about structuring your business and getting that buy-in from VCs, because they're interested in recruiting better people or being on those award lists, or, you know, those kinds of things too. And then once you establish that credibility, then it organically attracts more reviews. So I hope you just, you know, manage to do that exercise.
Damn, I've got some homework there, Saka. That's really good point.
Yeah. Joe, I've got a question, and this might be a bit left-sided, but right now, can you only review VCs? Because thinking about you want to gain traction and you want to target as many people in a startup ecosystem as possible, those that are pre-seed, it will be quite cool without diluting your main focus on VCs if you could leave reviews for other players like corporate accelerators, incubators, venture builders. And if they're pre-seed and that's the only way they can engage, because they've been there at the beginning of their journey, maybe they're more likely to come back in 2 years' time when they're looking for seed funding or their Series A, etc., whatever. So that could be a good way to get repeat business, because I feel like those that are very early on and maybe they've just done friends and family, or maybe they have no idea about startups, if they've got sort of that outlet and you can easily filter just VC, accelerator, incubator, whatever, you can still have the VC stuff, but then you're bringing people along at the beginning and trying to make it sticky for them.
Yeah, no, I really like that in terms of just going earlier in the life cycle of a founder. So we have some reviews for accelerators and we have a handful for venture builders, but we're probably not not really optimizing as well as we could do to allow founders to kind of find them. And anecdotally, most venture builders don't really score that well, to be honest with you. So it could be, which again might be the thing that kind
part of it, but part of that's what's
reviews.
useful, right? Like a lot of the things we talk about in terms of people being screwed over in fees or on just like crazy valuations. Like some of the times where it feels the most opaque is like at the beginning with angel, with SEIS funds, and with venture builders. So, but to be honest, I also think this is one of those like probably for you quite frustrating conversations, because so much of what we're saying are things that are inevitably going to be a consequence of stuff that is coming up in the near future. Like if Sifters start doing a bunch of league tables, like this is a FOMO industry. I can already like hear the sounds of desperate heartbeats to do things to optimize for moving up or down in the list. I think it's like no coincidence that like Hoxton were pissy that they weren't on the latest one, even though they could have been. Like people care about this stuff, and then once they do, it starts to set a lot of this in motion. So I think by far the biggest things are what I would like optimize for is like, is your team set up to take advantage of this momentum that's building, to be like come up with good ideas, implement those ideas, build the relationships where it's a relationship thing, set up the partnerships where it's partnerships, or the activations where it is. Because then I think if you have something like this in such a wide open space and you just have the right people, you'll do so much just based on that alone. But it's
I agree. And to be honest with you, like being pretty candid, one of our blockers for like the last couple of months has just been like a lack of dev resource, and hiring a developer has been honestly like probably one of the hardest things I've done so far. It was really, really tough, but we've got an unbelievable dev who started 2 weeks ago now. So now things are already moving so much faster. We've got a whole bunch of kind of like micro products that we're planning on launching that the way I look at them are value add tools and content for founders, but also I think if we position them in the right way, potentially act as some form of lead magnets to the larger kind of like landscape platform.
Mm-hmm. And also, I don't know how much you're over social media, but just thinking the classic Economist style graphs or, Vox News videos, if there's a way you can just be in a year's time, not just a league table, it's a bit of an interactive thing that's flowing through your feed. Like it grabs people's attention more, than they're more likely to engage. And I don't know how much you're going to give investors the chance to like comment. I mean, could they even respond to a review on Landscape yet? I don't know if you'd want that, but obviously,
not this second, but as of fingers crossed, and don't hold me to this, but as of like in 2 weeks' time, all of our verified partners and VCs will be able to, they'll be able to respond. So actually, I've just had our head of investor relations, Mike. I've just had him put together a guide on like how to politely respond to negative reviews and whatever it might be. So VCs will be able to respond to their reviews pretty soon. But I think actually on your point on social, Christian, like I feel that like we're not really scratching the surface at the moment. Like Twitter is our best channel because every VC and founder spends hours per day, doom scrolling through it. So we get a huge amount of engagement through Twitter. But the one that like I just cannot crack, and to be honest with you, we haven't really tried too hard, but is LinkedIn. Like I just cannot get anything out of LinkedIn. And it might be because I personally despise using it. But if anybody has any like LinkedIn growth hacks or like anything at all, like please throw them my way.
I don't have any. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise. I don't have any specifically to that. The one thing that I would say, and it was kind of another point that I think is really interesting, is like you're sitting on a potential, or you could potentially gather a really, really long tail of or comprehensive set of insights, right? You have a captive audience that a lot of people often look to create. I think Atomico, for example, does a really good job like creating this yearly insights report that touches on a number of things, and they engage with all of the stakeholders that you're engaging with as well. So this is kind of a indirect answer to your question, but what I would put forward as another kind of growth opportunity for you is like ask yourself what other data can I get from these stakeholders, given that the data that I sit on is so valuable and so few people have access to it. How can I productize that data? And if you can do that well, one, you could create like a state of the industry report that looks at something different, and I think that's like a really interesting stake in the ground. But like more directly to your question, and specifically to LinkedIn, I think like, why are posts performing less well on LinkedIn than they are on Twitter? Because like, the Twitter VC community is like this microcosm of like, it's like almost incestuous, and it's like, pretty disgusting. But like, you put something out there and you have like 100 and 150 like people read it that are, to whom this content is relevant, right? But like, when I think about like the people that follow landscape on, maybe that's actually more of a captive audience as well. But generally on LinkedIn, like my LinkedIn, like the audience is so distributed, like maybe 10 to 15% of people are in venture, and everybody else is like,
they don't care.
Exactly.
Like, what is this tiny asset class that doesn't actually really matter in the grand scheme of things? The other part that I would say there was sort of, but I'm remembering at the beginning when you were saying, how do you get VCs to care about founder data, and so can you effectively productize that bit, presumably to like monetize, because that would be an interesting thing to sell. I actually don't think you have to try, like, they do care. It's just a matter of like, one, how much does it start to feel like this is a source of information they don't already have access to? I think some of that comes from when things like leaderboards, league tables, in general, that rating meaning anything, because that's obviously the same for Glassdoor, in that most of their biggest customers would be the ones who are like, gosh, we are not looking hot, and I kind of thought we would be, and being able to understand what would make the difference, because so many, like, for the most part, people in this industry think they are good actors, and a lot of them are trying to be, or at least well-intentioned, and so there is a dissonance between what they think they're doing and clearly how it's being received by the founders who are rating them. So I don't think it's a matter of you have to do anything to create an appetite for that content, that information. It's so much more so about, can you set things up for they are aware that there is a need for that information, because now they want it, they just think they already have it, they think they hear it from founders or whatever. It's to point out that there is a gap, or it's why am I a 4.2 when I kind of thought that we were best in class, or whatever else.
It would be interesting for VCs to be able to commission through landscape surveys, like deeper dives into their optics, their brand perception. Like, let's say I'm a 3, and I'm like, damn, I'm a 3. If landscape would help me reach out to 1,000 or 500 or 200 founders and like get myself value perception metrics on like, where can we improve? How do you rank us on friendliness? How do you rank us on intelligence? Blah, blah. I mean, whatever metrics are most relevant. But like, if VCs could get that information out through landscape, I think they'd see value to it as well. Like, help me understand what founders really think, assembling qual or quant surveys through that.
Yeah, I think if you just make sure that that's something that you have full stop, then you're like good to go. And I kind of feel like it's there. If at the end of the day I'm giving someone a 4 or a 3 on friendliness, then they're like, that's a good time to be nudged for like, what would have made the difference? Like, what do I mean by that? Like, how were they unfriendly or whatever? And then it means at the point when someone is like, what the fuck, I'm a 3, you're like, I don't even have to do anything. I have it here. I can tell you what you did and what you didn't do, and what would have, and what are the points that people repeatedly made.
On Vinay's comment, sorry, I was going to say, I'd even try to monetize that. Like, you're having the same point. Like, I wouldn't do the same thing you did with the founders leaving reviews. You can see free, and if they want more, you could actually have that as an advisory arm. Probably maybe it's further along down the line, but you can create bespoke reports and maybe even suggest these are ways to improve it. Again, I know this completely depends on capacity, but that would be a clever way to do it. And on the LinkedIn stuff, happy to chat one-on-one with you about that, because I've used LinkedIn extensively over the years, and I think it's just playing to people's egos. So it could be something as simple as strategically tagging 2 VCs on one of your posts, and then they're like, "What? Why am I on here? What's happening?" Like, so there's definitely a lot of opportunity in LinkedIn.
Well, make sure it's the ones that are big enough that they've actually got someone looking at their LinkedIn, because everybody else is like, I have 10 minutes spare and I'm going to focus on the one channel that is actually relevant. So like, you need a 2-person or more marketing team before LinkedIn is getting any love. But yeah, you tag those ones, you might get somewhere.
But it does work. So my if I would say I have a marketing function, I'm not on Twitter, like not actively on Twitter. I spent more time on LinkedIn, and all of the audience that I have is on LinkedIn, and that works for me at least. And the kind of the VC Twitter bubble is alive and well, but it's the VC bubble. And there are very few founders who are actually part of the VC bubble. So if you want to attract founders, then the VC Twitter is actually not the right place, because then you get London and San Francisco, New York, but like outside of that, not so much.
Okay. So lots more to be done on LinkedIn then. I actually really like the idea, Christian, of just like tagging some partners in reviews, whether they're good or bad, and I think it would probably attract attention, especially if it's on LinkedIn, a professional.
I do that all the time.
Network.
You don't need a reach out person. You can just literally tag them, or like I got my first job in Hong Kong through literally stalking people's profiles, tagging them until they responded. I call it like polite aggressive persistence, but it's a free way of doing it.
Sentence I've ever heard. I love it.
Pap them. Okay, guys, we're out of time. Does anyone have any last words of wisdom, anecdotes, wise cracks, whatever you want to add to the mix?
I think this is epic, and I think you should make it as spicy as possible. I wanna rate every single person I have ever met in this industry, and I want to rate so much that I get some sort of little crown that says I'm a verified rater of people. I'm on all of them, and under any of them, and they respond and they're like, "Actually, we are really friendly." I'm gonna reply and be like, "No, here are receipts." So create what is necessary for me to reign terror across this industry. That's all I want.
Okay, noted. You can be the super user, Daisy.
I'm ready.
Oh, I didn't like this person's hat. 3 out of 10.
Exactly.
I mean, adding dress sense will probably add enough gossip spice to best dressed VC, etc. Hot or not.
Hot or not, I think that would definitely take off, to be fair.
Like we really stand for transparency, ethics, morals, hot or not.
Hot or not for VCs, right? That's going to be our next.
It will be your most popular function. Because human beings are just that bad.
We are. Well, that's why Sipta did that like hottest VC list once, and we were both like snarky, but also extremely smug about getting onto it. So it does work.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. I really appreciate it. If there's any 2 pieces of advice I could leave for you, it's number 1, jot down and challenge your assumptions. And then number 2 is you can always rely on people or entities to operate in their selfish interest. So everything you're doing should cater to someone's selfish interest, and you have a good product or ecosystem.
Awesome. Much appreciated. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and basically help me build Landscape.
We should only ever hang out with each other. It's way better.
And also shout out, the Johnny that was mentioned is Johnny Staton, an amazing PR person. So shout out to him. And if you're ever watching this, someone looking for a PR person who knows mischief and who can deliver mischief, he's your guy.
Nice. I might tap you up for an intro there.
You don't need an intro. It's in the community. That's the whole point of being in the community. Just message them. Be like, we are mates. Because Daisy.
The community's so big now, though, Daisy. The new people are getting added, and I'm just like, I haven't met these people or seen these people.
That's what the app is for. Go find him and say hello. Lovely. You'll like. Actually, I'm surprised you haven't met. He's very good vibes. You'll like him.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Bye, friends.
Take care, everyone.
Catch you later.